There's nothing I can say. I have the most respect for that answer. But you know, there's many types of research that need to be done with these products. And while people might say there's benefits now, who knows what's the risk? Who knows what the risks are later? We don't. Nobody does right now. These products are so new and so fresh and so hip these days that we don't have decades of research to know what might happen if you use e-cigarettes long term. It took us decades to know what cigarettes did. And it took litigation against tobacco companies to really know the harms that kind of came from smoking tobacco cigarettes. So, you know, unless we have regulations in place, who's to say the same thing won't happen with e-cigarettes? Who's to say these companies who are profit-driven, I know about profits, they are profit-driven, who's to say they may not do something similar and try to hide data about safety and tolerability amongst patients? We don't know that. So this is where regulations are key, and we're trying to hold back our, I agree with the enthusiasm, but we need to temper it a little bit. That's our view.
I'm just, you know, thinking about this patient. How great would it be if the doctor did have some kind of information to give them right now while we're waiting on all of Jonald's testing to go through? So.
Well, they do. They have patches and gums and classes and other things, which could be covered by Obamacare. Which we all know my feelings on Obamacare. But in this context, maybe it's a benefit. Other questions from the general audience?
He actually wants to cut all regulations except for water and air.
Yeah.
So those may fall under it.
Yeah, I know. Naturally he does. But in this context, maybe Obamacare has some benefit. Who knows? I've been known to flip-flop and to change my opinion.
Yes. Donald can be unpredictable.
If I'm anything, I'm inconsistent.
Yes. Your VP said something different yesterday.
Yeah, well, he's wrong.
Have you spoken to him recently?
To who? What's his name again?
So can you name one positive thing you respect about your opponent?
Well, I'll say this. I agree with many points that she says. She obviously presents her arguments very well, and I think that a lot of her arguments have a lot of merit to it. I just think she's jumping the gun a little bit. So I agree that we need to do more testing about these products for treatment purposes and to help with smoking cessation, but we need to know what we're dealing with first. We need to survey and to understand these products more before we can make any definitive conclusions and before we can explore them as potential ways for people to help quit. So I think all of her points are great, and I think that she did a great job presenting them, and I agree with them, and I'll agree more with them years down the road when we know the stuff that I presented.
I think one great thing about Jonald is he cares about the children. So he wants to really help the youth, and he wants to make sure that no one gets started on another bad habit that could potentially be bad. And, I definitely appreciate that. But I think that in that way of thinking, he's eliminating the possibility that this might actually end up being good. I'm trying to think.
We actually skipped the question.
Yeah.
Customary for me.
Yeah.
If anything, I shoot from the hip.
So I did make a flavor slide.
We did.
Did we? There we go.
Oh, all right.
Suspense is lifted.
Yes.
Now we can address this topic.
So e-cigarettes come in thousands of flavors. How should we be considering this diversity in our policies and regulations?
Okay. Well, yes, there is a really wide range of flavors, and there's a lot of diversity in that, and diversity is a good thing, Jonald. We like to have that. And so, having the different flavor options in e-cigarettes is actually one of the things that's really attractive for people who are trying to make a quit attempt. They like that their e-cigarette doesn't have to taste like a cigarette. And they like that it doesn't remind them of smoking because of that. So by having a lot of different flavor options available, it actually makes a really kind of more personalized treatment for some people, and it can, really be beneficial. There's a little bit of like a culture to it as well. So it's actually, if we want to talk about business, there's a lot of small businesses that are making these juices. and the e-cigarette solutions, the juices. So it's actually, creating a lot of different jobs and industries and kind of within the industry itself. So it's actually been really beneficial to allow different flavor options to occur. So especially from a treatment perspective, but also from a business perspective. So again, allowing these companies more leeway to do what they need to do without a lot of regulations keeps these products out of the hands of big tobacco. And that would be potentially concerning if the tobacco companies were to get a little too involved in this.
Well, they are. So big tobacco companies are starting to buy up e-cigarette products. So there are big tobacco companies who own, I think it was Lorillard or R.J. Reynolds or one of those. Obviously, I'm unprepared. But big tobacco companies are starting to buy up e-cigarette companies, and that's a scary thing, right? We trusted tobacco companies for decades, but they were leading us down a path to death for the most part because their products were dangerous and harmful and fatal. So if tobacco companies suddenly have access to things like flavors and things like e-cigarettes, who's to say where this industry might go? And just like we don't trust the tobacco industry because of the products they use, we need to take that same mindset if they decide to pursue e-cigarette ventures, and especially if they decide to pursue flavoring options, because it could diversify their products and make potentially dangerous products even more marketable to the general public. So you mentioned all these flavors that don't taste like cigarettes. There are tons of them out there. There were gummy bears that were mentioned earlier. There's cotton candy, there's chocolate, there's coffee. All of these are delicious, but that's a problem because if they're delicious, then more people are going to want to use them. And who's included in these more people? The kids are, okay? So you're making all of these flavors that are attractive to children and attractive to youth. And if they start using e-cigarettes, they might eventually transition to tobacco cigarettes, which could deliver nicotine in a stronger way because you're enabling them to develop a nicotine addiction by having these flavors. Plus, they might be hip and cool, like I said before, right? So smelling like a smoker isn't really a good thing, but smelling like gummy bears, that's awesome. So these are all important things to consider as we think about flavorings, right? Plus, who's to know what flavorings might do for other medical conditions, like the popcorn lung that I mentioned before, right? This is where research into the products is the most important aspect of this topic.
So, there are a lot of adults out there who also like gummy bear flavor. I am one of them.
I'm not a fan. Not a fan.
You've never had a gummy bear, Donald?
No.
No.
Never in my life have I ever had a gummy
He
bear.
tweeted about them in 2007.
Wrong.
So again, there are a lot of adults who also really like some of these flavors that we think may be attractive to kids, and a lot of the companies are taking note of that. So they're trying to make sure that their packaging is only, again, attractive to adults. They're really reinforcing these regulations that you have to be 18 to buy these things. So some of the small companies that haven't been taken up by the tobacco companies, they want to keep these out of the hands of kids, but they also appreciate that adults like the different flavor options. And so, and there's a lot of these smaller companies too that don't want anything to do with the tobacco industry. They like being a smaller business and kind of being more integrated with the anti-smoking culture. So again, having these flavors available is, kind of really, it'll boost their business and again, create a different type of culture that we have that again could be really beneficial in terms of treatment. And I do agree that we need to do research on the exact flavorings and what those health effects might be, but again, I don't think we should eliminate them entirely just because of that.
General audience.
Question for Hillary, Amanda.
Sure.
Has there been any research of people transitioning from e-cigs to tobacco?
So that's another great point, is that one of the benefits of flavors, especially when you're talking about children, is say they start using a gummy bear flavored e-cigarette, right? When they go to smoke a cigarette, that's going to taste terrible because your first cigarette does taste terrible. I think Donald may know a little bit more about that. And even our president currently right now could say that, certainly. So
Terrible role model to set.
So it's really it could go that because we have these flavors, people won't transition to smoking because of that. So it actually might be protective for the youth to have these access to more flavors.
Now, on the flip side, there is some, again, big word, correlational evidence suggesting that youth who start e-cigarettes can transition to tobacco cigarettes. These are large-scale surveys in states like California, and even though it's preliminary data, it's important preliminary data, and it's data that should be explored in a more systematic way. So again, this kind of gets to the theme of my party's argument here, that we need to know more about these products before we can advertise them as effective ways to quit smoking. Because there is data that suggests exactly the opposite, that these products and these devices might cause youth to pick up smoking as opposed to keeping them from smoking.
You know, Donald, earlier one of your arguments against me was about correlations, so interesting you bring one up again.
I don't remember that. I can't remember that argument. But it speaks to correlational data. It's not the best, right? So we can use correlational data to inform future research questions. And in our opinion, a future research question needs to be, do e-cigarettes cause the next generation of cigarette users? That's a question we can't answer right now. And to me, that's an important question that we need to answer before we can advertise these products as something to help people quit smoking. Again, jumping the gun. I don't think we should do that. It's probably the first time I've ever said that. Other general questions from the public?
So has, in this debate, having to defend a particular perspective, has it changed your personal views on either harm reduction or abstinence?
So I'll start with that, and I'll take my wig off at this point. But I do that because it hasn't. So I think that our lab's tone has been towards harm reduction and learning about the abstinence mindset and about things associated with it. They're important, but as Hillary/Amanda said, people are using these products, and that can't go ignored. So if they are an effective smoking cessation aid, we need to make that available to people. And as we collect more data about safety and efficacy, I think we should do that kind of parallel to the cessation data that we collect, as opposed to doing one then the other, which to me is what the abstinence argument reflects more.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's like a personal opinion that developed or if it's just I spend a lot of time with my advisor, but Dr. Brandon will often say he's cautiously optimistic, and I think I've kind of taken that on. So again, there are some things that we do need to consider from the prevention standpoint, and a lot of the arguments are good, but again, yeah, people are using them right now and they might actually be helpful. So I think we need to, let's capitalize on that now, and then down the line when we know a little bit more, we can kind of tweak things as we need to.
Any other general thoughts? So maybe not about this question, but about anything else that we may have talked about.
I was thinking about the side effects. So many nicotine replacement therapies have side effects and also Chantix. So what about the e-cigarettes? Do we know if they have any side effects?
There are some limited studies that suggest them. The popcorn lung study is an example of that, that people might develop some respiratory issues from using them. But again, I think as far as we know, they're not as severe as with tobacco cigarettes. There's something else called vape mouth, which people have talked to us about in focus groups before, where if they use the e-cigarettes consistently throughout the day, their mouths become dry and it might impact kind of their mouth in a couple of different ways. As well as their throats from vaping throughout the course of the day. So those are things that people have kind of reported to us and that may have been seen in smaller studies. But to put my abstinence hair back on again, it's something we should know more about, right? So we know much about the side effects of nicotine replacement and Chantix because they've gone through the randomized controlled trial process, right? So they've had animal studies and they've had human studies where treatment wasn't the focus, but safety was. And that's not the case with e-cigarettes yet. So if we want to advertise these as a product in that way, the safety data are going to be really important as a first step towards doing so.
Another like really interesting trend that I've kind of noticed talking to participants is, especially if they are using e-cigarettes to quit, a lot of the side effects of nicotine withdrawal and quitting smoking tend to pop up. So people will start using an e-cigarette and say like, oh, I'm like coughing a lot more now that I'm using it. But really, we know that when people quit smoking, your lungs start to clear themselves out. But people will misattribute that to the e-cigarette. So again, having some more information about, what is, again, if you're quitting smoking, what is nicotine withdrawal versus the actual side effects of your e-cigarette would be important information to give people so they don't, again, give up immediately because they're coughing.
Other general public questions? Well, I think the goal of this debate was A, for entertainment, which based on the laughter people got.
Yes. Happy
But-
Halloween.
But the other hope is to kind of bring to light different issues related to arguments behind e-cigarettes. This is a very